Dialectical method. The bud disappears when the flower blossoms, and might be said to be refuted by the flower. Similarly, when the fruit appears, the flower is recognized as the false cash existence of the plant, and the fruit takes the place of the flower as its truth. These forms not only differ from each other but supersede each other as incompatible. But their fluid nature makes them at the same time moments of an organic unity in which they not only do not contradict each other, but one is as necessary as the other, and it is only this equal necessity that constitutes the life of the whole. Hegel from Phenomenology of Spirit. The dialectical method is a method of inquiry based on identifying and resolving contradictions through dialogue or argumentation. The dialectical method considers the development of concepts and systems through the interaction of opposites, leading to their synthesis and the emergence of new qualities. The dialectical method is used to analyze historical and social processes, philosophical systems, and concepts. The basic principle of dialectics is development through contradictions and their resolution. This method is used to understand complex dynamic systems in which opposites and the interaction of opposites lead to the emergence of new forms with new qualities. Main components of the dialectical method. A thesis is the initial idea or statement from which the dialectical process begins. It can represent any thought, position, or assertion that expresses a particular viewpoint on a situation, phenomenon, or problem. The thesis serves as the starting point for further discussion. In everyday life, a thesis can take many forms. For example, summer is the most pleasant time of the year, is a thesis that claims summer brings more enjoyment than other seasons. However, the dialectical process assumes that the thesis is not an ultimate truth and must be critically examined. The antithesis is the opposing idea or statement that arises as a reaction to the thesis. It expresses a counterargument or opposite opinion, pointing out the weaknesses or limitations of the thesis. The antithesis helps to reveal contradictions and shortcomings in the initial statement. For example, the antithesis to the statement, "Summer is the most pleasant time of the year," might be, "But summer can be unbearably hot." The antithesis shows the other side of the issue and highlights that the thesis might overlook important aspects, such as the oppressive heat. The synthesis is the new idea or statement that arises from resolving the contradiction between the thesis and antithesis. The synthesis combines elements of both statements, preserving their key ideas and eliminating the contradictions. This stage leads to a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of the issue. For example, the synthesis of the thesis, "Summer is the most pleasant time of the year," and the antithesis, "But summer can be unbearably hot," might result in the new statement, "Summer is the most pleasant time of the year when spent in the shade or by the water to avoid the heat." Thus, the synthesis allows for the strengths of both statements to be considered, creating a new, more balanced understanding of the situation. Dialectical method in the context of philosophy. At the initial stage, consciousness perceives the world through direct sensory data. Here, the subject sees the world as a collection of separate objects, each existing independently. This is the stage where one does not yet distinguish between the internal and external, between one's own thinking and the reality around them. This level is characterized by limitation. Consciousness does not see the connections between objects and perceives them as isolated, without reflecting their interrelations. At this stage, consciousness begins to realize that it cannot know objects solely through simple sensory perception. There arises an awareness that perception depends on the subject, and this introduces the first contradictions. One begins to understand that objects are not perceived directly but through the filter of one's senses and mind. This gives rise to the problem: how does subjective perception relate to objective reality? At this stage, consciousness tries to overcome the contradiction between itself and the object, recognizing the existence of internal interconnections between objects. This is the stage where the subject realizes that things in the world are interconnected through forces and laws. However, at this point, one still does not fully understand the nature of their own participation in these interactions, seeing external force as something independent of themselves. After the stage of perception and the awareness of contradictions between subject and object, consciousness reaches the stage of self-consciousness. Here, the subject become aware of themselves as an active participant in the process of knowledge. This is a crucial stage, where one begins to understand that their perception and actions play an active role in shaping reality. However, self-consciousness also faces contradictions, such as the desire for independence but, at the same time, the need for recognition by others. Having reached the level of self-consciousness, reason begins to comprehend reality through science, art, and morality. At this stage, consciousness seeks to understand the world through concepts and universal laws that can explain the nature of reality. Yet, even here, there remains a gap between theoretical knowledge and practical reality, leading to new contradictions. At the stage of spirit, consciousness moves from individual reason to societal and cultural existence. A person realizes themselves as part of society, traditions, and culture, and their understanding of the world becomes collective. Here, a new awareness emerges: truth is not found in individual reason, but in the collective spirit, which is expressed through ethical norms, law, religion, and art. The final stage is the achievement of absolute knowledge, where consciousness overcomes all contradictions and attains complete unity with reality. At this stage, the subject realizes that their own consciousness and the object of knowledge are inextricably linked, and that the world and reason form a unified whole. Absolute knowledge is not merely a theory, but an understanding of all that exists as a single process, where the contradictions between subject and object no longer exist. Dialectical Method and Socrates. Socrates used the dialectical method by questioning his interlocutor's assertions and gradually leading them to recognize contradictions in their own statements. This method, known as the Socratic dialogue, helps reveal truth through a process of questioning and answering. When reading Plato's dialogues, we see that he often uses the dialectical method to explore various philosophical ideas and concepts. For example, in the Republic, Plato examines the nature of justice through a dialogue between Socrates and other characters. Throughout the discussion, opposing opinions and arguments clash, leading to a deeper understanding of the concept of justice. Dialectical Method and Karl Marx. Karl Marx applied Hegel's dialectical method to the analysis of society and economics, developing his own concept of dialectical materialism. In Capital, Marx explores the contradictions inherent in capitalist society, such as the conflict between labor and capital, and demonstrates how these contradictions lead to social change. Other things being equal, as capitalist production grows, so does capital accumulation. But capital accumulation means nothing more than the conversion of surplus value into capital. Thus, capital increases its power over labor, intensifying the exploitation of the working class. This, however, also leads to an increase in the size of the working class and a deepening of its exploitation. Karl Marx from Capital, Volume 1, Chapter 23, The General Law of Capitalist Accumulation. Marx points out that, on the one hand, capitalists, by accumulating more capital, increase the exploitation of workers. However, this process simultaneously sharpens the contradictions between labor and capital. As workers begin to recognize their collective power and the growing inequality, these contradictions deepen. Ultimately, this creates the conditions for social conflict. Karl Marx, thus, the accumulation of capital on the one hand increases the wealth of the capitalists, but on the other hand, deepens the poverty, slavery, dependency, degradation, and exploitation of the working class. This inevitably leads to a situation where, sooner or later, the working class, realizing its strength, will rise up against the capitalists to change the existing system. Karl Marx from Capital. This passage illustrates how Marx applies Hegel's dialectical method to analyze capitalism. The contradiction between capital and labor is not just a feature of the capitalist system but is the driving force behind its development. As this contradiction intensifies, it inevitably leads to social change, whether through reform or revolution. Marx sees capitalism as a system that inherently contains the seeds of its own destruction. The contradiction between the capitalist's pursuit of increased profits and the worsening conditions for workers leads to the accumulation of social tensions that eventually result in social upheaval. Dialectical Method and Goethe's Faust. Goethe used the dialectical method in Faust. The dialectical process in this work can be seen as the foundation of the plot and as a metaphor for the spiritual and intellectual development of the main character. Thesis: Faust and the pursuit of knowledge. The main character, Dr. Faust, embodies the thesis that the human pursuit is to obtain absolute knowledge and the understanding of higher truths. He is a scholar who, despite his extensive knowledge in science, medicine, philosophy, and theology, feels deeply disillusioned and dissatisfied. Faust strives for something greater, something that transcends human comprehension. He seeks truth that lies beyond the limited capacities of human reason and experience. Faust symbolizes humanity's thirst to understand the meaning of life, to grasp the truth, and to comprehend the unknowable. Through him, Goethe presents human nature, as constantly striving to go beyond its limits, reach new heights, and explore new horizons. Antithesis: Mephistopheles and temptation. On the opposite side is Mephistopheles, who embodies the antithesis. He represents skepticism, cynicism, and temptation. Mephistopheles not only opposes Faust's aspirations but offers an alternative view of the world, a materialistic, carnal perspective devoid of lofty ideals. His goal is to demonstrate the futility of Faust's quest for truth and to prove that human aspirations are in vain, while life itself is nothing more than a game of fleeting pleasures. Their dialogue and interaction create a tense conflict of opposites, where Mephistopheles uses his cunning to lead Faust astray, drawing him into a world of material indulgences and sensual pleasures. The pact between Faust and Mephistopheles is the central element of the antithesis. Faust sells his soul in exchange for the chance to experience everything life has to offer, which, in Mephistopheles' view, is the true purpose of human existence. Synthesis: New understanding and spiritual transformation. However, throughout the play, the interaction between Faust and Mephistopheles leads not only to destruction but also to profound spiritual transformation. By the end of the work, we witness the synthesis, a new understanding that emerges as a result of this dialectical conflict. Having gone through suffering, temptation, failure, and the realization of his mistakes, Faust attains a new level of understanding about the meaning of life. He realizes that true truth and happiness lie not in fleeting pleasures or knowledge for its own sake but in the pursuit of spiritual perfection and service to others. The contradictions between his initial ideals and the cynical reality offered by Mephistopheles lead him to recognize the importance of finding harmony between the spiritual and the material. By the end of his life, Faust achieves synthesis, where his pursuit of higher knowledge is combined with the recognition of the importance of human experience and action. Faust's death marks his spiritual rebirth, as his soul, despite the pact with Mephistopheles, is saved, indicating that the quest for truth, despite all temptations and failures, can lead to a higher form of existence. The dialectical method in Faust is revealed through the conflict and interaction of opposing forces, the thirst for knowledge and skepticism, spiritual aspirations, and material temptations. This process not only exposes the hero's internal contradictions but also leads to his spiritual evolution. Faced with these contradictions, Faust reaches a new level of understanding, where elements of thesis and antithesis merge in synthesis, a new, deeper perspective on life and the meaning of existence. Goethe shows that truth is not static. It is born through struggle, dialogue, and the overcoming of contradictions, making Faust a vivid example of the application of the dialectical method in literature.